2015, an elite DFS Army Commando unit formed to bring high-level DFS strategy to the masses. Today, hated by DFS sharks and lineup sellers alike, they continue their quest to turn Joe into DFS pros.
Welcome to Taco's Fast 40, the podcast about daily fantasy NASCAR, going through the entire 40-person field, or I guess in this case it's a 37-person field, at Auto Club Speedway, and just going over the race and giving my thoughts on each driver real quickly. This year we're going to try to focus more on the fast part of the Fast 40, just run down the field, giving my quick thoughts on everybody in the field, after just a quick synopsis of what to expect in the race. Going to be able to do these for a lot of the races that have qualifying pretty much set in place. It's not going to be as helpful, of course, when you have the pre-race impounds and stuff that are going to swap up the qualifying order right before the race and kind of change everything. But this week we've got everything locked in place. I do miss the Friday qualifyings. It made it a lot easier, but we're still here on a Saturday night. Just got done with the Xfinity race. Looking forward to the Cup race tomorrow at 4 p.m., I do believe. Either 3 or 4 Eastern Time. At Auto Club Speedway, also known as Fontana, in Fontana, California. As we're in the middle of our West Coast swing that started right after Daytona this year with the change in the schedule. This was always the 5th race of the season until this year when they changed it up a little bit. So this will be the 3rd race of the year now, and we're going to see Homestead no longer be the championship race. We're going to see that early in the season, actually. We'll be going to Phoenix next week, and that is going to be the host of the championship race this year. So I think a lot of people have that on their mind for next week. But looking to Fontana right now, before I dive into the track here, gotta let you know that DFSArmy.com is the sponsor of the podcast, obviously. I run all the NASCAR projections and the research station over there. Of course, you can check us out at DFSArmy.com and use promo code TACO on sign up to get you a lifetime 20% off. Get access to the research station that I'll be referencing throughout this pod. It's got everything you need from practice times, lap averages, projections, my custom speed ranks, track history, different stats based on a few different splits. This week we're looking at, of course, there's the Auto Club stats, but we'll also be looking at just how they did at the large and flat tracks over the last year, Pocono, Indy, etc., and then the correlated track stats, which are the tracks that correlate the highest historically with Auto Club. Just something else to look at too. And then many other stats. We've got listings of all the historical results and fantasy points dating back to 2013. The averages by start tab, which I think is a great way to start your research every single week. Lots of good stuff going on. Some lap by lap data. You can get access to all those goodies and the lineup optimizer at DFSArmy.com. And remember, promo code TACO, support the pod, and I'll get you a lifetime 20% off. So, gonna start at that average by start tab. You can look at it either with DraftKings or FanDuel, and this will give you a good sign of, it'll really show you how the people that start in different parts of the field generally fare, and how good drivers are, how many fantasy points drivers score, based on things like their season-long average driver rating, or just generally how good of a driver they are. You can see how the studs do based on where they start, the mid-tier guys and the scrubs. It kind of separates it like that. And this week, the tale here is the top 5 starting positions. They average 41.8 fantasy points. None of the other sections of 5, as far as starting positions go, average over 29 fantasy points. So, the front of the field, the really, really good drivers, they're going to do really good here. The guys averaging between above 90 fantasy or above 90 driver rating on average. Those are going to be the ones doing most of the scoring. They hit 40 fantasy points at least over 60% of the time, and for guys worse than that, we see a significant drop off. Heck, if you average over 100 driver rating on the season, so we're talking the best of the best drivers, Kevin Harvick's, Kyle Busch's, etc., they hit 60 fantasy points 44% of the time. If you're under that mark, you're going to hit it about 7% at best. So here we do see the best of the best drivers just doing a little better than usual. And you can also go to the tracks section, just breaking down the difference between all the different tracks here. Look at Auto Club. It ranks second in average laps finished. Not very many cautions here. 96% of the scheduled laps are completed by drivers. The track is wide open, very big. So even though there might be some crazy restarts that get out to like 5 wide almost instantly, there's so much room to operate with. You see a lot of people completing their laps. There's not a lot of devastating carnage, because even when there is a wreck, there's tons of real estate to work with getting around. They're not going to be packed up like super tight like at some other tracks. So, looking at how the pole sitter does here, it's kind of on the lower side. They average 46 laps led and 24 fast laps. So it's not quite like, it's kind of similar to Vegas last week, but it's not like some tracks like Richmond or Charlotte, where the guys starting up in the very front just have a huge advantage on everyone. Here it's more about just being a really, really good driver, and we kind of see that with some of these other really large ovals like Michigan, etc. It's kind of all about horsepower, since they have the long straightaways and stuff. It's not as much about driver skill as it would be at like a shorter track, something like a Martinsville. So this is a track we only go to once a year, so there's a little bit less data to work off of than a track we go to twice a year. And of course, it's always one of the first tracks that we go to in the season, so teams are still generally trying to figure their stuff out. Usually comes right after Phoenix, and then the 2 1.5 mile tracks before that in Atlanta and Las Vegas. That's usually where they're at here, but this is the first large oval we see this season, but the only real race that we have to go off of is Las Vegas. So it's going to be important to look at how guys did last week in Las Vegas, and the main thing we saw was the Hendrick Chevys were very, very good. They look exceptionally fast. Almost all the fast laps went to them. Chase Elliott especially had a killer car until the end when he took himself out, and that's not something that we've seen here historically. Looking at the last 2 races, last year especially with the package change to what they'll be using this season, we saw, of course, Kyle Busch and JGR. They've historically been the best at this track. They've got a lot of wins here, and Kyle Busch pretty much single-handedly holding off Team Penske that was running like 2, 3, 4 right behind him for a good portion of the race. Logano and Keselowski, they both did end up leading chunks of laps themselves, but Kyle Busch just had the best car, and he was able to race off to a win there at the end. And even though towards the end of the race, I think about 120 laps in this 200 lap race, we saw those JGR Toyotas, 3 of them, Hamlin, and I believe it was Truex and Kyle Busch. They all got pit penalties, got sent to the back of the line. But it doesn't matter as much here, because they're going to have plenty of room to race right back up there. And pretty much the best cars are the ones that are going to be doing well. Usually the guys that have really good practice times, that ends up translating right into the race. But we have an interesting situation this week where the practice times are all done in like 80+ degree weather. And we've got some rain in the forecast tomorrow. Yes, another rainy race, as we've had so far in every single weekend of NASCAR action up to this point. But we should see temperatures about 50 to 60 degrees at race time. So the practice times, usually that means that the practice times you kind of want to throw them out, but I still think they're very important here, and guys that tend to unload fast tend to stay fast, and we're going to want to look at the longer run speeds as well, because that's going to be important here. There's a lot of tire fall off, very little grip, very bumpy track surface. So whether or not you're going to fade the practice times or not, I don't really know. I think I'm still leaning towards looking at them pretty heavily, especially the long run speeds. I know that practice times tend to create a lot of chalk and DraftKings ownership. That has been how things have trended recently. You saw last week with Eric Almirola being really chalky, even though he had a pretty bad race. People just flocked to those practice times. And, that's what I would be doing here normally, but I might take them with a bit of a grain of salt this week just because of the huge disparities in temperatures. And honestly, when the track temps got the most similar to what they'd be during the race and like the latest part of practice too, a lot of guys were just in qualifying trim. So that's not going to be totally accurate, I guess, but the long run speeds, I think those will probably hold up, and there are some interesting guys that I'm going to be looking at based on that. So running through the field here, we're going to do this in DraftKings order, just by salary. Easiest way to go about it. For FanDuel, you have a pretty similar strategy. There's some huge place differential plays this week, and even though it's you get half the points for place differential over there, it's still going to be important. And a lot of these guys, they're mostly JGR Toyotas, and those guys tend to finish just so well here that they're still going to be very, very good plays to make over there on FanDuel. I think just the main difference there is you're going to kind of attack the ownership a little bit differently. We've got ownership projections out on the research station and domination station. You can check that out later, but there really won't be a need to punt as much at this track, at least on FanDuel, as you would on DraftKings. But you really, really don't want to use the scrubs here. That is definitely something that I've noted. Guys starting 30th or back, they score really, really poorly on FanDuel compared to other tracks. They do fairly decently here in DraftKings, especially if things do get mixed up or there's some pit strategy going on. We kind of saw that in the Xfinity race, but other than that, I'm still really like the bottom part of the scrubs. You're gonna want to skip most of them this week, but we'll get to that as we go down the field. But we're gonna start off with Kevin Harvick. I think he's gonna go very, very low owned this week at $11,600. The reason being is these JGR Toyotas, they're very, very expensive, and people are definitely going to want to pay up and play them. You got Truex starting 38th. He failed tech before qualifying, and so his time out there didn't count. He gets to start last in 38th. Gonna be super chalk, obviously, but he's $10,400. You got Harvick, who's $11,600. Just an ever so slight favorite to win over Kyle Busch. They're about even now, actually, at about 6-1. Kyle Busch starting back in 17th, so that's some good place differential for him too. I just think Harvick is going to get lost in the fray here. If you look at our speed ranks though from last year, and that's based on different lap speeds from the lap by lap data. You've got like the fast laps. It's just where guys rank in that. So if someone, like Kevin Harvick, he averaged a 2.7 ranking in fast laps. So he had, almost the third fastest lap on average at large and flat tracks last year. Just in general, that number would be 5.7, but did look really good on the large and flat tracks last year. Had, ranked third in the 10 lap average, which of course is number one in this field, right in front of Kyle Busch. The 30 lap average though drops down to 6.2. There are several guys underneath him that are better at that. So just like we saw last week, a lot of Kevin Harvick's speed is front loaded. So he's going to be faster earlier in runs. Or at least that was the case for him last year. Based on what we saw last week, we kind of expect that to go on. So that could, it could be a huge benefit for him if there's crash right towards the end, like there usually is at this track, and he could end up putting up a good finish there. But as far as long run speeds go, it's going to be better to look in the direction of JGR and Team Penske. maybe even the Hendrick cars as well. We'll get to them. So starting 5th, Harvick, honestly, he's going to be more of just a contrarian sort of play. He finished runner-up here in 2015 and 2016. Other than that, it's not really been all that great for him. He averages 25 lead laps, 20 fast laps here, which is okay. A 99 average driver rating here. It's 11% worse than his average driver rating. It's not really the best track for Stewart-Haas Racing. They were a bit trimmed out in practice, and they actually got the pole with Clint Bowyer. But that's something we see Stewart-Haas do a lot, but I don't really expect them to be major players in this race. And you just have to pony up big time for Harvick. I'd like him a little better on FanDuel, I guess. But honestly, I think his ownership might get so low. He could just be worth a shot. If he gets the lead out there, I think he'll be fine. A couple of years ago, he's trying to win his 4th race in a row here. Got knocked out by Kyle Larson in the beginning of the race, so we don't really know what he could have done there. But he finished 4th here last year. So just a good contrarian GPP play. Kyle Busch, $11,300. He's starting back in 17th. If it wasn't for Truex, he would be the chalk up here, I'm sure, because, he's 3-time winner here since 2013. I think he's won here 5 times overall. His driver rating of 123 is 10 better than anyone else at this track. He averages 14% better of a driver rating here than at other tracks, and he also does pretty darn good at this track surface, averaging about 58 lead laps, and we see the similar number at Auto Club itself, averaging 55 lead laps. 24 more lead laps than anyone else here. Just definitely the best of anyone in this entire field at this track, coming off of a pretty lackluster performance at Las Vegas last week. The JGR Toyotas kind of always suck there, so I don't know if that'll really affect ownership too much. I know a lot of people will be looking to last week, and it was pretty apparent that the Hendrick Chevys were really good and the JGR Toyota struggled, but not terribly worried about it. The practice times were not that great, 24th in first practice and 10th in second practice, but obviously it knows how to get around this track. You got a lot of options as far as how you drive, but you should see him move his way up the field, get some fast laps, potentially lead part of this race. He definitely knows how to win here, that's for sure. So he still makes for a pretty solid play, has decent enough place differential, and I don't know why he's not the most expensive over Harvick. Those two really should be switched. Joey Logano at $10,900. He took a step up, honestly, last year at the intermediate ovals, and here he has 4 straight top 5 finishes coming in. Only averages 9 lead laps at Auto Club, 11 fast laps, and dominator points is something that we've seen him struggle with historically. But he's been really solid. Last week looked great. At other kinds of tracks like Michigan, the horsepower tracks, we saw him do really good last year. Sometimes he'd just be really fast. He didn't make a 20-lap run, but he had the fastest 15-lap run and second fastest 10-lap run in second practice. So, he could be someone that goes out there. The thing with him is he likes to just run in second and not get any dominator points, but still be like one of the best cars on the track. Really good on restarts and kind of on long runs too at this track surface last year. I would like Logano. He's just way too expensive. $500 more expensive than Truex, who obviously is going to eat into his ownership a ton. He's kind of a similar play to Harvick this week for me, where just the presence of guys like Truex and Kyle Busch are going to make him really low owned, but it's hard to get there because you're going to want to play Kyle Busch, you're going to want to play Truex. You just really are. And so if you're going to be like shoving and playing like 80 or 100% Truex, it's going to be almost impossible to get you some Logano in there because you can't afford everybody, especially with the scrubs being pretty much unplayable. But if you want to make a stand on him, I mean, his practice times were really, really good in the second practice, and he's just looked pretty good recently, at least at the ovals, and not many people be on him. Martin Truex Jr. at $10,400, starting 38th. Not a lot of analysis really needed here, honestly. He's starting last. He's Truex. He averages 30 lead laps here, 17 fast laps. So it's really just a game theory play, honestly. You can either shove. The field's probably going to own about I mean, depending on what tournament you're in, he's going to be 50 to 70% owned in cash games, and in the Survivor they're starting this week, is definitely going to be about 80, 90% owned in those. In some double ups he'll be 100%. So, I mean, in cash it's obvious. You can probably make a good amount of money by fading him this week and hoping that something happens to him. But I don't know if that's necessarily the best strategy. Winner in 2018. Honestly, just make a decision for yourself what you're going to do with him. If you want to play it safe, just play a ton of him. If you don't want him to matter, just play him like 60% and try and match the field. Or if you want to, if you got the balls and don't mind burning your money, you can try to go underweight on him or even fading him if you're a crazy person. Brad Keselowski at $10,000. He has a really good history here. His recent finishes are 3rd, 4th, 2nd, 9th, and a winner in 2015. We see this a lot with Team Penske where Logano's good at a track and Keselowski's good at the track, and that means that Blaney's going to be pretty decent at the track too, and we've seen him do really good over the last few years also, always coming in the top 10 here. Of course, him and Logano, they were the fast cars last year, just stuck behind Kyle Busch for the most part. You saw Keselowski not lead quite as many laps as Logano did last year, but overall he averages more lead laps, just ever so slightly. Starting 15th, that's solid, honestly. He's going to a top 5 finish from him, which is very likely, is going to be, pretty solid as far as scoring goes, as long as he can get some fast laps with it. Just a solid play, very similar to Logano, but much cheaper, $900 cheaper. So, and starting a little bit farther back, so just a much safer version of the Logano play. Chase Elliott, $9,800. Struggled here a little bit historically, but he had the fastest car last week, especially in long runs. He was blazing fast. Struggled at this track type, does 11% worse at large and flat tracks than average. And again, hasn't finished. He was finished this year 11th, 16th, 10th, and 6th. Not all that great. Only 1 lead lap on average, 6 fast laps. So definitely a downer track for him. But with the brand new Chevy body that's come out this year, they have looked a lot faster. You've got Bowman, who looks like the best car on the track, leading every single practice split, and that's his teammate right there. You got Johnson starting on the outside, so his teammate's looking really solid, and last week they couldn't have looked any better at Las Vegas, so definitely a case to be made for Chase. Even though he was 26th and 17th in practices, I think he's gonna do a solid job of feeling out the card. He'll sneak up there in the top 10, kind of like how he always does. He just has to not crash himself out. It's hard to say he'll be low owned because Elliott, just like his dad, was very, very popular, and the DFS community does like him a good amount. And everyone saw that he had the fastest car last week, had over 40 fast laps. If he can have any performance like that this week, he'd crush value at low ownership, comparative to guys like Truex and that. So. Just kind of a play I'm on the fence about here. Another Chevy here, Kyle Larson, very good at this track. Runner-up in 2014. Had some kerfuffles in 2016, 2015, but winner in 2017. He was the one that wrecked out Harvick in 2018. Still ended up finishing runner-up. 12th last year at the package change, but he got some damage from Ricky Stenhouse there early on the race, so got to cut him a little slack there. He is someone who's likely to get into trouble oftentimes, but this is really low DNF track. Not too worried about that. He was 2nd fastest in the first practice, and 8th in the second practice. Looks solid enough, I guess. You can choose any lane you want to drive out here. We saw Briscoe in the Xfinity race have a lot of success running the outside, and that's something we've seen from guys historically. That's how Larson's done really well here in the past, and can definitely do that again this week. It's a wide open track. You can pretty much do whatever you want, and one of the turns you really do want to ride the outside on that one. So that's always something that makes Larson look pretty good here. He's priced up just high enough that he's not going to have real ownership, I think. So he'll make for a good play in GPP. And you've got right after him Ryan Blaney at $9,400. Looked great in the second practice. Fastest lap, or the second fastest lap, behind only Bowman, who crushed everything. Top 4 in all the lap averages, 5, 10, 15, 20. So just a really solid second practice for him. Looked like one of the 5 best cars out there for sure. Top 10 here the last 3 years, wrecked in his first year in 2016. So not a bad history here. Again, was part of the Penske's really pushing last year when he had made the switch over to the 12 car. So I think he's going to be really solid. Starting 16th. If Keselowski's a cheaper version of the Logano play, then Blaney's a cheaper version of the Keselowski play. I do like him a lot at that price. I think he's going to be solid for GPP, and you could consider him in cash, but I think cash you're definitely going to play just the JGR Toyotas and move along. I don't think there's much of another strategy besides that, but GPP really like Ryan Blaney this week, and he has got a killer paint scheme. His body armor, purple and yellow, tribute to Kobe Bryant, looks fantastic. It's going to be beautiful out there on the racetrack. Denny Hamlin at $9,200, starting 28th. Going to be a super chalky play as well as Truex. He's the cheaper version of Truex, starting 28th. Of course, Truex starts back in 38th, so he's going to be super chalk, but Hamlin's going to be right there at a cheap price tag of $9,200. Ranks like 5th in this field, or 6th in this field, in 30-lap average at large and flat tracks. That's something I do like to see right there. Some top 10 finishes here recently, but hasn't been knocking on the door quite as much as his teammates Truex and Kyle Busch. Of course, he was the one pushing Kyle Busch to victory here last year, helping fight the good fight against those Penske Fords. But starting 28th, again, not really a lot of analysis needed here. He's pretty much just going to come in the top 10, score about 50 to 60, maybe 65 fantasy points, and just be a really solid value. You play him in cash. GPP, you're probably still playing him. Just going to come in with some lower ownership compared to Truex, who's just like obviously the best play. 9,000, you've got Jimmie Johnson in his final race at Fontana, where he got his first win. He's from California. Big important race for him. Starting on the pole, right? He came so close to the pole here. Would have been very poetic, but Boyer just edged him out. I think they're all a little trimmed out there. It did not seem nearly as fast as his teammate Bowman in practice. He was 21st in final practice. 15-lap averages, he was only 13th. 10-lap averages, 17th. So wasn't blowing the world out or anything. Did have the 4th best 5-lap average in practice 1, but he didn't take a longer run than that. If this was last year or the year before that, I would just easily fade this guy. But these Chevys do look solid, and he actually has a chance to dominate a little bit early, honestly. He really does. So I'd play just a little bit of him, but I'm definitely more interested in the guy I'm about to talk about here at $8,800, Alex Bowman. First in every single practice split, in practice 1 and practice 2. Unloaded super fast. So he's got a rocket. He came 21st here last year. Again, this is a track that the Hendrick Chevys had not had success at since Jimmie Johnson was like elite. But of course, with the new Chevy body, we're gonna see how that changes. It seems like he's gonna be very fast. I like him as an early dominator option. And honestly, it's gonna be hard for the field to play too much of him. He might get to like 20% ownership, but usually if someone has these kind of elite practice times, he's going to get super popular. But with people having to pay up for Hamlin and Truex and all the nice place differential plays and Elliott, Blaney, Keselowski, Kyle Busch, it's not a given that he's going to be chalky. He might kind of go overlooked a little. Maybe people will think about the difference between the track temps then and now, and that is something that could come into play. Especially if the rain causes delays and it just becomes sort of a mess. He's not been good at this track historically, really, but nonetheless, still just a very, very fast car, and we've seen cars that unload fast here just do really well in the race. I just wish he would have taken run longer than 10 laps here. So really like him. Especially on FanDuel, where it's like 10K. I don't think he'll be very popular, but I do believe he can dominate a good portion of this race. We saw his car come into its own late last week, and he ended up with a good finish after being kind of pedestrian for most of the race. Kurt Busch starting 4th, looked really solid in the practice times, again with his Chevy. His teammate Kyle Larson's had a lot of success here. He's had plenty of top 5 finishes here. Just recently, it's been kind of a rough stretch for him, but he did finish 6th here last year after making the switch to CGR. So he could be a really, really underrated play. Like, his ownership's going to be very, very low. So, just a sneaky contrarian play, but that's it. I really don't see him dominating anything, really. It's going to be hard for him to actually put up, like, an elite score, but he just has the chance of being, like, an offhanded dominator here. William Byron at $8,400, starting 21st. This is going to be the obvious Chevy that people will go to, with his teammates looking so much better than him. But his 5 and 10 lap averages in the second practice were 5th and 6th best on the board, 6th best average speed. So you're not really someone you're worried about too much. Averaged a 9.7 finish at the large and flat tracks last year. That's really good. It's a lot better than some of the guys higher up than him, like Chase Elliott or Larson or Blaney. So it could be a very, very popular play, even though this mid-range won't be very popular. So I don't think it gets too out of control. Might be under 30% even. But, pretty safe play just based on where he's starting. An extremely unpopular player will be Eric Almirola, $8,300. He was chalky last week and let everybody down with just a real meh performance after looking super hot in practice. It's not really the case this week. Just looks kind of pedestrian. He's 50-1, starting 6th. No one's going to play this guy. He's the most contrarian of contrarian plays. But last year he had his best finish here of 9th. And his ceiling is just not really there. So makes for a pretty obvious fade for good reason. For $200 cheaper, at $8,100, you could just grab Eric Jones starting 29th, right next to Hamlin. That seems like a really smart play here. Finishes with 12th, 7th, or 19th. If he has a finish in the top 15, pretty much he's going to be solid and enough value. Just a way better play than the guys in this range here. Clint Boyer starting on the pole at $7,900. Very cheap price for him, but outside of a third place finish here in 2017, he's never really finished in the top 10 here. At least it's been a very long time. 31st in the 10 lap averages in second practice, so I'm thinking that he just had his car trimmed out and just not looking like a very good play at all. Going to be almost an entire fade for me. I don't even think he leads to begin this race. He could. He absolutely could. He actually did pretty decently at the large and flat tracks last year with a 7th place average finish. But a lot of DNFs too. He crashed out of half of those races last year. I don't know. I just really, really don't like Boyer on the pole here. And I won't be playing much of him at all. Maybe a few lineups, but, this is not a very good pole sitter here. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at $7,700. Like I said, ended up crashing out everyone last year. Still finished 14th. Finished 5th here in 2016, but other than that, no good finishes. In the new JTG Doherty car, the 47 that Allmendinger and Preece drove last year. I do believe Preece had a pretty good finish. He finished 23rd here last year in that car. It's not great, just kind of an average finish there. But Stenhouse obviously looks a lot better this year, at least so far from what we've seen. But starting 10th, not a very appealing play kind of whatsoever there. Matt DiBenedetto starting 12th. Now, of course, he's in the Paul Menard car from last year, racing for the Wood Brothers. So, for last year, his best finish was 29th here. Finished 18th last year in his Levi family racing ride. But this year will be a little bit different of a story. But starting 12th, just kind of a similar play to Stenhouse where, I would be more interested in him if it wasn't such a bad track type for him and he wasn't starting up so high. He did have good practice times, honestly, but just starting a little high. I think he's going to be overlooked for most people, and it's really hard to make too much of a case for him. Austin Dillon at $7,400. Now, this is a really strong play, starting 25th. The last 3 years here, he's finished 10th, 10th, and 11th. Very good at getting top 15 finishes. Just a really solid place differential play. No way he stays 25th. That's not really going to happen. He's going to move in the top 15 and kind of finish between 10th and 15th. That's about what you can expect from him. So he should break 40 fantasy points pretty easily and just be a solid value play at $7,400. Chris Buescher at $7,200. I liked him going into this week, but then he qualified 11th, so there goes that. Best finish here was last year when he finished 16th. But he's probably going backwards. He's looked really good so far this year. He's in Stenhouse's car from previous years. which has not had the most success here, although it looked pretty decent last year with the other Fords. But it's 125 to 1 right now. Starting 11th, just I don't really see any upside for him at all. Christopher Bell starting 22nd. Nice little play there, with the Levi Family Racing Toyota. Got the direct connection to JGR, those Toyotas. Pretty much the car that Dibenedetto was driving last year and finished 16th in, or finished 18th in at this race. Has a race here in Cup. Did all right at this track in Xfinity, but I mean, he had like the best equipment by far there. I pretty much expect him to go from 22nd to 15th or so and just be okay, but I definitely prefer Dillon a lot more in this range. And you've got the first of the big three in Bell from Xfinity last year, and you got Custer and Reddick right next to him in salary, so those are good guys to compare him to. Custer, not excited about him at all, starting 18th in his Stewart-Haas Racing 41 Ford that belonged to Suarez last year. You can look at what Suarez did here. Finished 7th in 2017, and 23rd in 2018, but that was in JGR equipment. Last year in Stewart-Haas equipment, he finished 13th. That would be a pretty alright finish for Custer, but the guy I'm really excited about here to play out of the rookies is Tyler Reddick. I think a lot of people know this. He was third fastest in the first practice, 14th in the second practice, but 9th and 8th in the 5 and 10 lap averages. 8th best average speed in practice. Now, the thing with him is he's sort of like Larson, very good at the tracks that Larson is good at, and this is one of the tracks that Larson is good at. Very, very talented when it comes to driving the outside. We saw him do that a lot, and did pretty well here in Xfinity. Starting in 19th, I do like him better than Bell and Custer. I would definitely rank them Reddick, Bell, Custer as far as the rookies go for this week. And maybe I'd even throw John Hunter Nemechek pretty much even with Custer in that regard. Maybe even like him a little bit better starting farther back. But that's how I feel about the rookies here. Definitely excited about Reddick. I think he can he can overperform. And right now Bell's 100 to 1, Custer's 150 to 1, but Reddick's 66 to 1. Vegas a little attuned to that this week. So definitely like Reddick there. Ross Chastain at $6,500, driving in Ryan Newman's number 6 Ford Roush machine. Starting 27th. I think he's going to be a very popular play in this range. Almost good for cash. In much, much worse equipment. He finished 28th and 29th here over the last 2 years. He's 60 to 1 right now, so even better odds than Reddick. This is pretty much going to be a smash play in cash and stuff like that. Has top 15 potential. But we're going to have to see here. Just a really good play. Daniel Suarez at $6,400. He's 600 to 1. He's going to begin the season, people were playing him a lot. He's starting in the back in the 96 Gaunt car that Parker Kligerman actually had some success in last season when he would drive occasionally. But it has been a dumpster fire so far for Suarez. His car's falling apart, dying on lap 2. So it's going to be a fade almost for sure. I don't know if people will kind of follow suit and his ownership will tank because it's been high, but it's definitely looking like it's going to tank. Has the 7th and 13th place finishes here, but in much, much, much better equipment. His practice times were 33rd and 31st. Just not feeling it there, Suarez. Bubba Wallace at $6,100. He starts 14th, and that should pretty much be the end of the analysis there. He starting way too high. Qualified just way too high. Did have the 3rd fastest lap in practice, but you saw the 26th lap, or the 26th and the 29 rankings in his 5 and 10 lap speeds that it's not really for real. I really doubt that Bubba even stays relatively close to where he starts. Just not looking like a very good play there. Ty Dillon at $5,900. Still very, very cheap. I've always found him to kind of be sort of a slave to track history. If there's a track he's good at, he kind of continues to do well at. And here he's finished 27th over the last 2 years. Not the most encouraging results for him, but he's so cheap. Starting in 24th, I could see a top 20 out of him maybe, but there's just such a lack of options once you go under $6,000 that, some people will end up playing Ty Dillon. His results so far have been really, really good. probably too good. He's finished 10th last week at Las Vegas, which it's stunning, right? But that was just kind of a weird race with people finishing all over the place. All of those wrecks. I mean, come on, Bubba finished 6th there. That's not going to really translate into this race, I don't think. I mean, I would like looking to last week in Las Vegas, but the finishing order just was all messed up, like big time. Literally, the reason that Bubba and Ty finished top 10 last week were just because they didn't pit at the end. That was it. They were not going to finish like inside the top 15, maybe even the top 20 last week, but I digress. Dillon's definitely a better play than Bubba Wallace in my opinion, that's for sure, but I'm not like terribly excited about either of these guys. You've got John Hunter Nemechek starting in 23rd, right in front of Ty Dillon there. First year, hasn't raced here yet. In Xfinity, we don't really know how well he did because he crashed at this track, but I pretty much view him as a very similar play to Ty Dillon here. Expect kind of the same results. Just 27th and 30th in practice. Not very good, but he's been all right to start the year, finishing 11th at Daytona, 24th last week at Las Vegas, but he was looking really good before all that mess. But again, just not, I don't know, you're really just playing him for the lack of options if you really need to go up and pay for, if you want to try to be overweight on Harvick, he might be someone you have to look at. But, pretty much once you get past like the rookies and the upper 6Ks here, it's just very hard to find plays. So $5,700, he's a shot in the dark you could take, I guess. Michael McDowell at $5,600, he starts 8th. And that should pretty much end the analysis there. His best finish here is 24th from last year. No, don't play him. He's a full fade. It'd be ridiculous to play him. Maybe on FanDuel. Maybe on FanDuel. But on DraftKings, absolutely no way. Ryan Preece at $5,500. Starting 20th. This is probably the guy I'm going to end up on a lot. Even though I don't really like him starting 20th. He should finish sort of around that spot. He's in the Busch car from last year, which, I know he's just moving over from the 47 to 37 on the same team pretty much. And, mostly at the same crew and all that. But honestly, he's just so cheap. And he just has the ability to finish kind of where he starts that, he's just so overwhelmingly better than everyone underneath him. I'm probably just going to end up playing him because he's like the cheapest guy that I can possibly stomach. And that's pretty much the reason for playing Preece here. He finished 23rd last year. You're just kind of hoping he finishes where he starts. But if the most expensive guys end up dominating and you just need them, this is the kind of guy you need to smash into your lineup. And I really, really, really don't like the following guys I'm about to talk about here. So just to clean up the rest of this field here, $5,400. You got Corey Lajoie starting 26, which is definitely a bit high for him. But this with Lajoie, it's just like Preece. I like him significantly better than the guys underneath him, but that is not saying much. He's just starting too high. He's not going to really do anything. Would much rather have Preece there. Timmy Hill at $5,300, starting 37th, but let's be real, he's starting 38th because Truex is going to pass him so ridiculously fast. He only took 5 practice laps and he was 5 seconds off the pace. So, yeah, he's going to finish in like the bottom 3 or 4, pretty much guaranteed, and get you like maybe 12 fantasy points. And yeah, you're not going to win anything playing Timmy Hill this week, unlike at Daytona where it seemed like he was going to break the slate. Then Brennan Poole at $5,200, probably the best of all of these scrubs, but starting 32nd, no real upside there. JJ Yaley starting 30th, that's just awful at $5,100. At $5,000, Reed Sorensen starting 33rd, again just shaking my head here. He's finished 34th here the last 3 years, and I project him to finish 34th again. Why not? And that'll net you exactly 9 fantasy points. So if you want exactly 9 fantasy points, Reed Sorensen is your guy. Garrett Smithley, the best thing he can do is wreck out a leader that you faded. So, you can count on him for that. But 2,000 to 1, 36th place last year in his only start at this track. Not someone you're going to want to depend on at all. And then Joey Gaze at $4,800. starting 34th. No, just bad. And Quinn Hoff, starting 34th. Or starting 35th, my bad. You might play him just because he's the cheapest of all of these guys, and he's probably the second best of all these super scrubs behind Poole. But still, I mean, gun to my head, I guess, if I had to pick anyone, Timmy Hill or worse, I would pick Quinn Hoff, but I'd do it begrudgingly. I really just want to avoid this range, so just kind of focus on the guys above that make a lot of sense and kind of stick to my guns there. But that'll wrap up the Fast 40 for this week at Auto Club. Best of luck to you guys. You've been absolutely crushing it so far this year. Been a very profitable year so far. We've won a lot of tournaments. We're going to keep that going as we move on through the season. Remember, dfsarmy.com, promo code TACO if you haven't already signed up. You can join our Slack, ask questions before the race, and try to catch me tomorrow at 12:30 Eastern Time. I'll be on the Horn FM, or at least I should be, the Texas Longhorn Sports radio station. I can always try to tune in and catch me there with Wags. And hit me up at Taco DFS on Twitter. And I will see you guys later. Good luck.